Hey there, Blip here, and for today for you guys I have the rotation and combustion part of the Fire Mage guide. I'm just pretty much in this video going to get you on the level where you can easily step into a raid and do your rotation comfortably as a Fire Mage and perform fairly well. I'm going to be showing you the optimal way to use your combustions, and I'm going to be showing you different types of combustions as well. I'm also going to cover a lot of basic stuff for some of you people that are more unfamiliar with Fire Mage and need to learn. So I'm going to be putting timestamps in the video, so if you come across something that you already know, just look in the timestamps, skip it, go on to the next part you don't know, and just continue watching the video like that. That should be the most helpful way for most of you. Otherwise, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, which I am going to be doing, I'm going to be doing more videos on Fire Mage combustions, the different types of combustions you can do in different situations. I'm going to be talking about more fundamental things like lag tolerance that affect Fire Mage in a very strong way in certain situations. And I'll also be talking about more specific Fire Mage stuff like spending your Stygia in the game right now, where you can actually get a really big DPS increase if you manage your Stygia well and spend it on certain things, which I'll talk about in another video. So if you want to see that sort of stuff, I heavily recommend you subscribe, because I will be going into a lot of detail when it comes to Mage. And I also have a lot more stuff on the side I'll be covering at some point in the future, which I'm excited to show you guys when it comes around to it. Otherwise, let's get straight into the rotation part of the Fire Mage. So to start with, I just want to talk about some of the absolute basics of Fire Mage, so as I said, skip past this if you already know it. So the first part I'm going to be talking about is fishing for healing up procs. Now as a Fire Mage, it is textbook that you always fish for a healing up proc, turn it into a hot streak with your fire blast, and then you always cast a hot streak together with a fireball. Now the reason you do this is because there's a 0.25 second or roughly something like that delay on the target, but if you were to hit 2 spells consecutively within that time frame, their crits won't cancel each other out. And what I mean by this is that whenever you get healing up proc, if you don't crit another spell in a row, then you're going to lose this healing up proc and lose potential damage from that. But by casting a Fireball and Pyroblast together, they both hit at the same time, so if one crits and one doesn't, they won't cancel each other out, and you have just the same chance of generating and heating up. But it can also just turn into another hot streak instantly, and since you're always casting Fireballs, that's really nice. So I'm just going to cast it like this now and show you. And as you can see, I'm just getting some free crits here. I'm just fishing for the procs now, turning them into hot streaks and casting them with Pyroblast. See, I get lucky, I get another crit here, and you get way more crits consistently. Now obviously I ran out of Fire Blast, so I just have to cast Fireballs regularly, and I've got another one so I can turn it into a hot streak again and cast it with a Fireball, and so on. That's simply the Fire Mage rotation, and if you're lucky you get 2 crits back to back, but since you're always casting Fireballs between hot streak usages anyway, you know, you're always ready for it. So get used to that if you're starting out Fire Mage. It's an essential part of your rotation and you always need to be doing this. Now the only time that changes is when you're playing with the Searing Touch talent, because obviously this is an execute talent and it's giving you guaranteed critical strikes, which means you don't need to be casting Fireballs anymore when there's a target you can Scorch below 30%. But that means you're also not going to be casting hot streaks with Fireballs anymore, because that would be a waste of potential damage, because you have a Scorch, which is a guaranteed crit. Why would you cast a Fireball that is not guaranteed? So the simple thing is, when the target is below 30%, you're just going to Scorch twice, get a hot streak, and then put that hot streak straight into a Pyro without casting anything with it. Then you'll just use your Scorch twice, and then Pyroblast again, simply like that. Now you still have your Fire Blast, remember we're in this phase, in your execute phase, so you can just use Fire Blast along with one Scorch cast to get some hot streaks, and then keep spending them like that. And that's just simply the rotation when you hit below 30% and you're playing with Searing Touch, which is the current choice at the moment. So make sure that if you're playing with Searing Touch, you change up that part of your rotation when you get below 30%, otherwise you're always fishing with Fireballs, as I mentioned. So now I'm going to talk you through the combustion and the rotation. So this should really help give you an idea of what I'm thinking and what you need to do as a Fire Mage in terms of your priority of your spells. Now keep in mind I'm playing with the Soul Igniter trinket here. I use this incorrectly, but I'm going to show you how to use that correctly in a different video. So keep an eye on that if you want to see that, otherwise just ignore the Soul Igniter here. This is just the trinket I'm playing with and it has a special use. I don't want to cover that here because not everyone is playing with the Soul Igniter. The available time has started. I'm going to hard cast the Pyroblast here at 4 seconds. Gonna cast my trinkets as soon as that's done. Gonna cast a Fireball, turn this into a crit with my combustion. Gonna cast Fire Blast now, get my 2 stacks of Infernal Cascade as soon as possible. Then I'm just gonna weave in my Phoenix Flames and my Fire Blasts just separately, just so I can extend my Infernal Cascade as long as possible. Gonna Rune of Power, use my Shifting Power instantly. Gonna use one Fire Blast while channeling here just to make sure I don't overcap on charges. And now I'm just fishing for heating up procs. If I get a crit, I will use them with a Fire Blast and turn them into a Fire Blast with a Fireball alongside it all the time. Just simply so you have the highest chance of getting as many crits as possible. Now you're going to be using a Rune of Power of cooldown as long as it doesn't overlap with anything, like Combustion for example, so I see it's coming up here. It's not going to be a very good Rune of Power because you have nothing to cast with it, but if you hold it for too long you're just not going to get any damage from it at all. You're going to miss out on potential casts, which is worse than just using it when you have it up. So here I see my Combustions coming up now. You ideally want to have all of your Fire Blast charges ready for this, but I messed up and I wasn't ready for it. So I ended up having one less crit. That's okay, I'm just going to use that Fireball just to generate a crit. And now I have to make up for that misplay of not having 3 Fire Blasts. I'm going to Scorch here to buy myself some time, turn it into heating up and spam my Pyroblast. Thanks to lag tolerance I get that off in time. And as you can see I was still able to extend my Infernal Cascade despite being in this tricky situation where I could have missed out on a hot streak. Rune of Power's up, so I just use it. Well, I use my Shifting Power after my Combustion, then I use my Rune of Power because I got it off cooldown from my Shifting Power. Now I'm just doing my rotation as normal. I use the Phoenix Flames charge here because I know that I didn't get a crit and I could just use it because I didn't get one off in my Combustion, and as you can see I'm going to have another charge up for my Combustion, so I was free to use that Phoenix Flames however I wanted to. Now I see my Rune of Power's coming up, but you have to see that it's also coming up with Combustion. And I don't want to completely waste the Rune of Power, there's just no point using it then. So I'm going to hold this Rune of Power. I have all my Fire Blast charges ready for this Combustion now. I have a heating up, so I'm just going to use this. I'm going to just turn that Fireball into a critical strike anyway, because why not? It's just 3 damage. It doesn't cost much time either. Now I'm just alternating between my Phoenix Flames and Fire Blasts. And I just barely get that Phoenix Flames critical strike off there. I use my Shifting Power here. And then I just go into casting Fireballs. So I'm going to use 2 Fire Blasts here because I see I didn't get any crits and I don't want to overcap on charges. Since I was at 3 charges I needed to use up that hot streak as soon as possible. I just used 2 to generate 2 crits and then cast it with a Fireball to fish for crits. Otherwise I'm just doing my rotation as normal again here. As you can see it's very fast paced rotation, my Rune of Power's coming up here, just going to use it off cooldown again. I could have turned that into a crit with a Fire Blast. You have to be careful with your Combustion though, because you remember you can get crits back to back and it can come off cooldown a lot faster than you anticipate. But here I have a nice amount of crits ready. I have a hot streak, I'm just going to save this for my Combustion and I'm just going to go into it hard. Just chaining hot streaks back to back. Alternating between my Phoenix Flames and Fire Blast again just to give myself as much uptime as possible on my Infernal Cascade. And using my Shifting Power on cooldown again, making sure I don't cap on Fire Blast, so I use my Fire Blast while channeling Shifting Power, and then I'm just using my Rune of Power of cooldown and going back into my rotation again. And that's quite simply the Fire Mage rotation. There's not really much complex to it, it's just simply making sure that you have your Rune of Power using on cooldown pretty much as long as it doesn't overlap with anything, making sure you have all your charges of Phoenix Flames or Fire Blast up for your Combustion window where all of your damage is coming in, and just weaving together crits in your Combustion while having as much uptime on Infernal Cascade as possible. Now obviously this wasn't a perfect rotation, you saw I made some mishaps, I accidentally messed up one of my Combustions, but I left this in there and I'm actually quite happy I made the mistake because it just shows you, your rotation as a Fire Mage, you have to adapt on the go. You can't just give up and stop DPSing once you make a mistake, you have to adapt and move on with it. Obviously that second Combustion I had where I had less Fire Blast charges wasn't a very good one, but it wasn't a bad one either because I missed out on one potential critical strike because I couldn't use that Phoenix Flames, but I still made it work and I still did decent damage in that Combustion window. And that's the one thing that I feel is very important as a Fire Mage, is adapting to your current situation, preparing for the upcoming situations, and executing your Combustion as flawlessly as you can. So now I'm going to talk you through the Timewarp Combustion. Now the Timewarp Combustion on pool is quite a bit different than your typical opener, simply because you have so much haste that you need to extend your Infernal Cascade for longer because you're going to use up your Fire Blasts pretty fast. Now to do this we have to use a few things. Now we're going to use some Phoenix Flames back to back because we have enough haste to get them off and use a Fire Blast just before our Infernal Cascade runs out. And the other thing is we're going to be doing some Scorch weaving. I like to call it Scorch weaving because it really is just Scorch weaving. It's weaving a Scorch into your combustion. And I'll slow down the video and I can just quickly explain it to you when we get to that point. Otherwise, this is your Timewarp Combustion. So I'm going to hardcast the Pyroblast on Pool. Let's see what we get from this. If we get a crit, I'm going to combust and use one Fire Blast for that. We got a crit, okay, I'm going to combust off that. Fire Blast, get my Infernal Cascade up instantly. I'm going to double Phoenix Flames back to back into Pyroblast. And as you can see, I can Fire Blast there before my Infernal Cascade comes out. Okay, now I'm going to start the video here because this is the end of my combustion, right? So you see here, before my combustion is coming to end, I have 3 seconds left of it. My Infernal Cascade is about to run out. And I want to extend my Infernal Cascade just for a bit longer. So what I'm going to do is I have a heating up proc. I start channeling my Scorch. I Fire Blast before the Scorch finishes its cast to buy myself that crucial time on Infernal Cascade. The Scorch cast finishes, but I queued up my Pyroblast instantly, and as you can see, the Pyroblast has been launched and the Scorch generated me heating up, and then I know my global cooldown is about to come up. I know this Pyroblast is going to hit before my global cooldown comes up, and I have a heating up ready, so I'm just going to spam Pyroblast and I get that last Pyroblast off before my combustion ends. And that is your typical Timewarp Combustion. Now if you didn't understand what I just talked about, I'm not going to go through it again because it would take this video way too long, and I'll make a separate video on Scorch weaving for those of you that find it a bit complex or maybe need a bit more time with it. Otherwise, just replay this part of the video that I just told you about, the time warp video. You can check the timestamp to go back to the start of it, and just keep watching through until you understand exactly what I did in that combustion to make sure I got the most out of my Infernal Cascade and made to get as many hot streaks as I possibly could in my combustion. Now, there is a really optimal combustion you can do, but I just want to talk about 2 different types of combustions here. So the first combustion I'm going to talk to you about is the double Fire Blast, double Pyroblast combustion, which is simply where you're going to open with a Pyroblast before it finishes its cast. You're going to combust, and then you're going to double Fire Blast and then double Pyroblast. This gives you 2 stacks of Infernal Cascade instantly, and it's going to make you do the most damage in your combustion. The only downside to this is that if you want to do this, you have to Pyroblast on pool, which isn't optimal for pure DPS, and you have to remember, if you're going to Pyroblast on pool, you have to make sure your Pyroblast is going to go off after the boss has been pulled, otherwise you're going to cast Fire Blast before your Pyroblast finishes and ninja pull the boss. So I'll just show you this here in action right now. I don't want to do a 50-second pull timer, that's too long. So when there's about 3.7 seconds left, I'm going to hardcast my Pyroblast here. Before it goes off, I'm going to cast Combustion, double Fire Blast, double Pyroblast. As you can see, I have 2 stacks of Infernal Cascade now, and I'm going to Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames, Pyroblast, and I'm just going to alternate between them. And that is how you get the most damage from your combustion. But it's only if you're combusting just to get your combustion off cooldown as soon as possible. And there are fights where this is important, for example, Cancer or Blood. There's that fight, I feel like I need my combustion on cooldown ASAP, because if I hold it for even 1 second, what's going to happen is that the attendant is going to come in quick, put a shield on the boss, and I'm going to lose so much damage because my ignite is just getting absorbed. And then also there's a point later in the fight where I need my combustion as soon as possible, because otherwise the boss is going to phase to 50%, and I'm going to miss out on a combustion worth of damage, or half a combustion worth of damage. So having it on cooldown instantly is why I do that. Now, the other combustion I want to show you is one that's a bit more difficult. It's actually really difficult to pull off. You have to really be prepared and know what you're doing, because the optimal opener for a Fire Mage is hard casting Pyroblast. Once the cast is finished, you're going to pop your trinkets if you're playing Soul Igniter. If not, you can hold on to it for a second. And then you're going to cast a Fireball. And depending on if that Pyroblast crit, your combustion rotation is going to change. Because that's the thing about combustion, it's about being as efficient and chaining together critical strikes and not wasting potential generators. Wasting a generator is making you lose a lot of damage. But obviously, to get the most damage from your combustion, you want to get your Infernal Cascade up as soon as possible. But if this Pyroblast does crit, right, that means I'm going to have 1 heating up ready, but it also means that I'm also going to have this Fireball that's going to crit because I'm going to Fireball Combustion, which means I'm going to have 2 crits ready, which means that I need to instantly cast a Fire Blast before this Fireball hits, which will leave me with a hot streak, but that Fireball is still in the air. Then I need to cast that Pyro Blast before that Fireball hits, and then cast another Pyro Blast, and then a Fire Blast, and then into my normal rotation. And that's probably the hardest thing about Fire Mage rotation in my eyes. It's getting it right, because as I said, it's so versatile and volatile, and it's just so hard to pull off. It's just you don't really have much time to know what to do, so you really have to practice and practice until you have it on autopilot. That's why I just showed you that simple combustion at the start, where I'm just combusting off my fireball and just doing it simply, because I want to have consistent damage. I don't want to mess up my opener, because I mean I'll get less crits, which will mean I'll get less duration of my combustion, which means I'll do less damage in general, and you don't want that. So that's why I always tend to play it safe, but it's always about adapting to what hits you in that opener. Are you going to crit that Pyroblast, or are you not going to crit that Pyroblast? If you are really uncomfortable with that uncertainty, then you can just combust off the first Pyroblast you're doing. The only problem with that is that in my case, I'm going to maybe miss out on a bit of damage, because remember, you cannot activate your trinkets while you're casting. It just won't happen. So you have to instantly use them afterwards. That's why I have my trinkets bound to combustion, because I just tap combustion twice. So for example, on this Pyroblast here that I'm going to combust off of, I'm going to combust, double Pyroblast, I'll rise, and I'm going to press my combustion one more time, which can be hard to do sometimes, but that way you're going to make sure your trinkets are being used, because missing out on your trinket usage, it's just so detrimental to Fire Mage. You just can't have that happen. And I'm sorry I went on a bit of a ramble here, but as I said, it's just Fire Mage is not easy as people make it out to be. Sure, your rotation is easy outside of your combustion, but your combustion is so responsible for most of your damage that, you know, if you go for these small minor adjustments to get more damage and you mess them up, you're ending up doing way less damage. So I hope that was somehow useful to you, that whole ramble I did, because I feel like it's the most important part of playing Fire Mage. Reacting to your crits when it comes to your combustion. So what happens then, as I was going on about, because I went on such a rant, I might have not made some sense to some of you. So what happens then when you get that critical strike on your Pyroblast at the start? Or what happens if you don't get it? Well, if you don't get that critical strike, you know your Fireball's gonna crit when it's in midair, so you want to double Fire Blast and then double Pyroblast as I showed you earlier, because that is the optimal move, because you know what's coming in. And the main thing is you don't want to have downtime in your combustion, so if you're waiting for your Fireball to reach the target, you're missing out on damage. So I'm just going to do a pull timer here and we'll see what we get. Fire Blasting. I'm going to put my trinkets because I'm solo nitring. I'm going to Fireball. I didn't get anything, so I'm going to double Fire Blast, double Pyro Blast, Phoenix Flames, Pyro Blast, Fire Blast, Pyro Blast, Phoenix Flames, Pyro Blast, Fire Blast, Pyro Blast, Phoenix Flames, and one Pyro Blast. Okay, see, it was a bit close. I actually didn't get the crit at the end there because I combusted too early in my Fireball cast, which meant that I missed out on a bit of time towards the end of my combustion. Otherwise, yeah, Fire Mage is reactionary. If you really don't understand what I'm going on about now, because it really can be a lot sometimes, even I struggle with it, then just go back to the first combustion I showed you. Just learn to do that consistently, or just do the one where you just combust on your first Pyroblast, because as I said, you're really not missing out on that much damage doing it that way. Like, it really is so minuscule, and it's just more consistent to pull off because you know what's coming. You know that Pyroblast is going to crit, you know how to chain your combustion from that point onwards, whereas the way I typically do it is more inconsistent, and it can lead to me doing more damage on some pulls and way less damage on some pulls because I eat up my crits. Now I'm going to talk you through your AoE rotation. Your rotation is simple as casting Flame Strike. This is your AoE rotation, of course, but this is your AoE rotation. You're simply going to be using Rid of Power, pretty much off cooldown. Going to use your Fire Blast to just generate some Flame Strike, instant cast with Hot Streak, but otherwise you're just going to be spamming Flame Strike all the time because you're playing with Flame Patch and we don't really do any more damage outside of this. As you can see, I'm doing decent sustain damage, and that's without even playing with Flame Patch. And that is just Fire Mage, that's just how it is right now. We just need to cast Flame Strike because it does a lot of damage and we do no damage outside of it. Now, there are some people that say you should Flame Strike on 2 targets, but I wouldn't listen to them because you have to remember you're still playing with Kindling, and if you're playing with Kindling, that means you need to have your Fireballs and your Pyroblast casts, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on potential more Combustions, which you're going to lose a lot of damage from. So I would say only when there's 3 targets or more, you hardcast Flame Strike, but then you have to look at the situation as well, because Mythic Plus is a very adaptable situation type content where you need to plan from pack to pack. So if I see that my Combustion has like a 40-second cooldown, this pack is kind of close to dying, but there's a big pool coming up, I'm not going to use Flame Strike on these 3 targets, because first of all, you don't really do that much damage outside your Combustion anyway, and second of all, I need my Combustion up for that big pool, because doing more damage on that big pool is going to be way more valuable to me than just having, you know, a bit more damage on these 3 mobs by hardcasting Flame Strike. And that's the real thing you have to pay attention to when you're playing Fire Mage and M+. Look at what's coming up and plan ahead accordingly. If you need more Combustions and you need to get your Combustion up as soon as possible, then don't waste your time casting Flame Strike on so little targets. If you see there's like 7-8 targets and you have nothing up for them, then you're most likely going to get more damage from just, you know, hard cast Flame Striking with Runa Power and your Fire Blast, as I just showed you before. So yeah, that's the one thing you have to really pay attention to. Just adapt to your situation, but otherwise, in general, yes, casting Flame Strike on 3 or more targets is very worth. Okay, so now I'm going to show you your AoE Combustion. The AoE Combustion is actually very simple. I'm going to do a pull time. I'm not going to hardcast the Pyroblast because I'm just going to pretend that the tank is pulling stuff together now. I want to be in close enough so I can shifting power, otherwise I'm going to Fireball, I'm going to turn this into a critical strike, and then I'm just going to dump these on Flame Strikes. I'm going to alternate between Phoenix Flames and Fire Blasts, just to make sure I'm not, you know, wasting Infernal Cascade. Gonna get some more Fire Blasts off here and then finish with a nice Flame Strike. And that is really simply your AoE Combustion. You just want to be using all your hot streaks and generating all your hot streaks to dump on Flame Strikes, because your Flame Strikes do a lot of damage. And you also want to be using your shifting power in your Combustion, because you're obviously going to run out of hot streaks very fast. Unlike your single target Combustion, you know, you're not getting heating up procs because you're not casting Pyroblasts into the boss or into the target, and Flame Strike doesn't generate heating up, so you're missing out on more, you know, generators. So you have to use all your generators to generate hot streaks for Flame Strikes, so you have to use your shifting power towards the end of your Combustion to get more generators, and also because it does a lot of damage, especially if there's a lot of targets up. Now you're not always going to have shifting power up for your Combustion, and in cases like that, you know, it sucks, but it doesn't matter too much. Just, you know, if I'm just, for example, Flame Striking here, I can just use my shifting power on this pack, and then I'll have my Combustion up for the next pack, and I can just, you know, go into this Combustion here, do some more AoE damage, and then I might just have to, you know, use a Scorch because I have nothing left. But it's okay to use Scorches to get a Flame Strike procs. It's not as nice as having the big damage from shifting power, but sometimes you're just not always going to have shifting power up for your Combustion, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, the most damage you can do in your Combustion is with your shifting power windows, because as I said, shifting power does so much damage, and getting more generators to spend on more Flame Strikes is really crucial. And especially with Timewarp, you'll be so starved, and with Timewarp in your AoE Combustion, you actually do so much damage because you have more time at the end of your Combustion to use the generators that you just generated. One last thing I would like to say about your AoE Combustion as well. Don't Flame Strike Combust 3 targets. I would only Flame Strike Combust 4 targets at the minimum, and sometimes not even that, 5 targets plus, but 4 targets is a good number honestly. Like, your Flame Strike starts doing considerable damage when you have 4 targets or more. The reason I wouldn't Flame Strike Combust at least on 3 targets is because you have to remember, your Combustion is where you're getting the majority of the cooldown reduction from Kindling, because you have so many back-to-back crits going in, you're just getting that cooldown reduction off really fast. And if you were to Flame Strike Combust, remember, you're basically getting no Kindling from that. So I strongly recommend only AoE combusting on 4 targets at the minimum, and more targets is even more worth AoE combusting. As soon as you go higher than 4 targets, it becomes insanely valuable to Flame Strike Combust. Otherwise, I would say 4 targets is the minimum. You can do on 3 targets if, like, you're at the end of the dungeon, or you know you're not going to really need the combustion timer. For example, if a Prideful's about to spawn, you know, and you're going to have a bit of time to get your combustion down, and there's only 3 targets in the pool before that, then yeah, sure, you can flame strike combust that, because you know you're going to be able to get your combustion back up before the next big pool anyway. Otherwise, yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about thinking ahead and just looking for the best situations to combust AoE or single target. But otherwise, that's all for your AoE combustion. Now, before ending this video, I just want to talk about a few more general rotational things. So the one thing I would like to say is that you don't always want to use all your Phoenix Flames in your combustion. Sometimes you might want to save one for when an ad is pulled in later. So in that case, you just want to do a combustion where you're going to use a Scorch instead of a Phoenix Flames, and that way you're going to save a Phoenix Flames charge for the end of your combustion when an ad is brought in, and you can just spread the last bit of your ignite onto that ad. I do that quite frequently on fights like the Huntsman, where an ad comes in before when my combustion just ends, and now if I was to use my Phoenix Flames with my combustion, I wouldn't be able to spread my ignite, so I save one for that situation. And then there's also times for like Uncancelled Blood, for example, where I would find that there'd be loads of ads just stacked up for a second. So, and I got some good hot streaks back to back. My ignite is not huge, but it's not small either. That would do a fair amount of damage if I spread that. And my Phoenix Flames would cleave onto the targets as well. So on Mythic Cancel, for example, where this ad is knocking us back, I see that the boss goes in the opposite direction, and I put a Phoenix Flames on the boss to spread my ignite to all those ads around where the boss is in its new position. And that's just a really minor but other way you can play Fire Mage to get the most out of your damage. But it's a very minor thing. If you really don't want to do that, you don't have to. It's just a minor little optimization that I do whenever I see the opportunity arise. Remember, if you use up too many Phoenix Flames on stuff like that, you might find that you have no Phoenix Flames for your combustion, which means your combustion is going to be weaker, and maybe there will be ads coming in for your combustion anyway. Otherwise, yeah, Phoenix Flames is really freeform. You can use it whenever you feel necessary. Most of the time you save it for your 1-minute combustion. On AoE situations, there are times where you might want to save it just for a bit of burst damage or when there's more ads coming in later. And that's the only point I really wanted to make with this. Your mirror images is a good defensive cooldown, but if you really want raw DPS, like just, it's not going to do much. It's so minor, your mirror images, that it really doesn't make much of a difference. But if you use it before you pull the boss, like 5 or 6 seconds before you cast your Pyroblast, no sorry, like a second or two before you cast your Pyroblast, then you'll gain like 10k damage extra throughout the fight, because that's how much your damage your mirror images do, roughly about 10k when you use them. So keep that in mind. That is a decent amount of damage for a free cast, but at the same time you're losing a defensive, and it is so incredibly minor. But if you want to be full optimal DPS for like just raw DPS output, then yes, use your mirror images 6 seconds before the pull. Now, one thing I want to say about using a Scorch is that you should use it whenever you can. If there's like an ad that's sub 30, what you can do is you can Scorch off that ad and you can put the Pyroblasts into the boss. That way you're gaining the most possible damage you can, and you're not really cheating on the ads because you're using the ads to get bigger Pyroblasts on the boss. So that's my one advice, just always see if there's something you can Scorch off of to put your damage into the boss. That's what I always do, and I feel like it's a very good practice to practice and uphold, because you want to be making the most out of your class and talents whenever you can. Otherwise, I don't really think I have anything left to give you. I think that's absolutely everything I can think of when it comes to Fire Mage rotation, and yeah, I hope this video has really helped you out and helped you understand Fire Mage just that bit more better. I might have gone into a bit too much detail on some bits and maybe even confused you on some bits, but I feel like going into this detail and really talking to you guys about why these things work in certain ways will just give you that information to make you take it home yourself and really develop your skills. Yeah, if you think I missed anything, or you want to know about anything, or you have any questions at all, be sure to ask in the comments. Like, I really do like to help you guys out, and I'll respond to them as soon as I see them. And yeah, please consider subscribing. I love making content like this, and we've been growing insanely well actually lately. I've been so happy. It's going really well, and I'm really enjoying it as well. So yeah, please consider subscribing. It would be amazing to have more of us in the community. I could pull out the whole, oh, only 9% of you are subscribed to my channel, you know, typical YouTuber thing, but I'm not going to do that. Subscribe if you want to see my content. If not, I hope to see you around another time. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. See you around.